Our regrets are stories we tell ourselves. When you constantly worry about your past, you're supporting that belief in your present. We were curious about what would happen if we tried to release those worries and rewrite our stories. So we decided to do an experiment.
What happens if we dedicate time to relieving our regrets? This is a show where we take a moment to reveal the messy bits about ourselves without judgment. It's a show where we can reflect, learn, grow, and maybe even laugh about our actions, attitudes, and behaviors. It's a place where we can speak about our past and learn from it. Join us on the journey.
Hello, everybody out there in the world. Welcome to Let's Relieve Regret. I am Victoria Murcia, and this is my co-host.
I am an interrupter. I am the co-host named Shadoe Ball.
And welcome to today's episode. Let's do a check-in. How are you doing today, Shadoe?
I'm doing all right. I would give it about I think we should keep going with this out of 10 format. So I'm going to say today I'm a 7 out of 10. How about you?
Seven's pretty good. I think I'm a 6.5.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just having a little bit of a slow day today, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm allowed. We're allowed. It is a Sunday today.
Yeah.
Do you have any cause for applause?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because it already, I was ready to brag about something and then I totally shot that in the face right off the top. Wow, that's another phrase I'm trying to get out of my system. Shot out of.
Okay, let's release that regret right now. Release it.
I'm just really trying to clean up my language. I didn't realize how not image, but I give a lot of imagery in my descriptions of things, and sometimes the imagery is just it's not meant to be violent, it's just there. Instead of 2 birds 1 stone, you could use feed 2 birds with 1 scone.
Ooh, do you think it's a lot of it's pre-programmed, right? A lot of it's our generation, or we heard our parents' generation say it, or even our teachers. A lot of it's pre-programmed, so it kind of goes into that conversation about understanding what our preconditioned biases are and our pre-programming is, and just being aware and changing it. So that could almost be a cause for applause, Shadoe, that you're working on that, because we should all be working on understanding our conditioning and our programming, because we all have it. But what's your real cause for applause?
Yeah, my real cause for applause is actually completely related to that. I'm in general starting to see improvements from my ADHD training with my coach. So specifically around impulsivity, I do have a hard time waiting my turn in conversations. But just with a lot of the different strategies we've been implementing, I've been able to get better at it. And it's just interesting to me that I guess I just didn't realize how often I was doing it or how disruptive it really was. But then it's I have a heated conversation with my husband, and I can hear my brain telling me to do old behaviors, and then I can just sit there and wait and be like, no, I would like to respond to this more thoughtfully. And that's amazing for me. I didn't really. Yeah, I'm just excited.
More than amazing. Cause for applause. Woo! Insert applause sounds here.
Yeah, for sure.
Self-awareness is one of the hardest things to practice, and holy dooly, as my Australian friends would say, holy dooly, that's incredible. That's an amazing cause for applause, Shadoe. I'm so proud of you. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a skill that we can all learn how to do, whether we have ADHD or not. It's
for sure. So that's been really, really helpful for me. Would you have a cause for applause you'd like to shout out this week?
Well, mine's a little bit about self-awareness, but not really. But I worked out yesterday. Yay! But I lifted really heavy weights, which I haven't done in a while.
Okay.
And I'm so sore today. I couldn't eat. My armpits are so sore, but it's a good sore. So I'm telling, well, I did like chest press and push ups.
Right.
So like,
yeah.
Kind of like the like outer boob / armpit muscle, you know?
Yeah.
Like, like it's just starting to feel stiff now. And it's a good stiff, that that good stiff where you're like, okay, I know I'm building muscle. I know I'm getting stronger, but
right.
So I'm going to give that my cause to applause to remind my brain to think positively and know that good stuff also, you have to be uncomfortable sometimes for the good stuff. So my cause for applause is that I'm sore from working out.
Yeah, so definitely related. Like we're both celebrating how like training takes time and takes consistent practice and effort to yield results, but sometimes we don't see the results, or we don't see them in a way we were expecting. But if we're open to seeing how like if we don't force the results, we can be surprised by the results. Does that make sense, or is that too like woo wishy-washy?
No, I love woo woo, that.
Yeah.
I also just want to say I'm so glad you're my friend and you're doing this with me, because we can have these conversations.
Nice.
I love deep conversations, and they help me become elevated, involved by a human experience. I love this. So thank you.
That's great.
Third cause for applause, Shadoe. Thank you, Shadoe. My cause for applause is Shadoe.
That's very nice of you. I won't do another one. No, I'm kidding. I always applaud your presence in my life, Victoria.
Okay, I think it's your turn to go first today.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I'm ready.
Let's do this. Let's relieve regret, everybody. Let's do it.
I regret trying too hard to impress others. I have an experience I need to let go of to move forward. I regret trying so hard to impress others that I ended up on a path that I did not want. I think this is a general regret that a lot of people go through, especially when they discover that maybe they're a little bit more people pleasing than they thought. I always considered myself a bit of a rebel, but when I was writing this regret, I realized that I've made a lot of decisions to be more in line with people pleasing than I thought. So, I mean, what this manifested as was that I ended up going to university for something I didn't want. And it's not that I didn't want it, it's just that I wanted something else so much more. And the more and more people that told me to not go for it, the more I believed that. And so like I chose a different path. At least I said I chose it, and I had this like comforting soundbite around the choice. So, like I repeated that soundbite to like everyone who asked and some people who didn't. So that's just, to me, a sign that I wasn't maybe ready to make that choice. And I'm still regretting it now. It's funny. I wrote this out thinking I didn't regret it anymore because I have all these other reasons why I don't regret it. But some of the consequences I am missing out on due to holding this regret are that I still hold back on trying things that make me feel really great, due to a concern that I might appear vain. In addition, I hold on to this idea that like, had I just stood up for myself all those years ago, then perhaps I would have made like different decisions along the way and I wouldn't be in such a mess now. And realistically, I know that's not true, because like there was lots of positives that came with that choice. I met a lot of people, including my husband. I learned a lot of things that I wouldn't have learned. Like my first Toronto boss, if you will, out of university, she was a real stickler when it came to formatting in a way that at the time I thought was super ridiculous. But at this point, it's a skill for me now. So I actually really appreciate her helping me with that. But man, it's interesting. I both really appreciated my undergraduate degree education, but at the same time, I really wanted something else, and I still hold on to that regret and I daydream about how different my life would have been. But I did everything in that moment with the tools I had at the time. that is okay. And I have grown in some ways. I'm not going to say so many ways around this one. The one thing I'll say though is I did find out what kind of life I don't want, which in a way is as important to figuring out what you do want. So I mean, that's nice as well. I'm clearly still a bit nervous, but also relieved, because I'm now capable of weaving this experience into other projects, and I'm worthy of rechanneling some of this energy into impressing myself.
Thank you for being so vulnerable. I want to validate that for you. Mm-hmm. Do you want feedback, or do you just want to be heard?
I would like feedback on this one. Clearly it's to talk about conditioning from the top of this episode. This conditioning is deep rooted. It's more than half my life has passed since the moment I made this decision, and clearly it's still impacting my everyday life.
I think well, first of all, I want to thank you, because I think so many people out there listening, and myself included, can get stuck in this people-pleasing cycle. And I think women, here's the feminist in me coming out, and that's good. I'm a proud feminist. I think women do it more than men. Maybe I'm making a generalization, but I think it's part of the societal norm or culture for women to get in this people-pleasing cycle more than men. And the way that I look at the people-pleasing cycle is, I'm unsure about something, I get kind of outside pressure, so I say yes. And then the next step is like, I start questioning myself. I feel resentful. I feel exhausted. I might feel regret. I promise myself that next time I'll say no. And then I feel guilt for feeling the feelings of next time I say no, or I'll put myself first, because then I guilt myself into thinking, but then I'm not taking into it. I'm not looking after the people that care for me, or taking into account what they, and then it just goes back to saying yes. Right. That's what I call the people pleasing cycle. But I think this is a really big discussion, and a good discussion. I'm so glad that you brought it up, to know that it's okay to do what you want to do, and to release and relieve those feelings that you have around it. And I think part of the reason is, as you hear in our intro, listeners, is this is an experiment for Shadoe and I. We wanted to see how it would affect our lives, and how it would affect our mental and emotional health if we participated in this practice of being really self-aware and really talking about regret in an open and safe space with each other. And I think this might be a first step in that process, or a second or a third step in letting it go, right? When we focus on the past, I believe that when we focus on the past, we're living in regret and guilt. And when we focus too much on the future, we're living with worry. And it prevents us from being in the present. And part of relieving regret is letting go. So I think you just did that first step in that. So I want to applaud you and thank you. And I know 100% that there is at least one person listening right now that is nodding their head and saying, yep, I know where you're coming from. Yeah, me included. But you have made a difference in at least one person's life by telling that story. I have a curious question. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but
that's okay.
What was the comforting soundbite?
See, I wasn't gonna put the details in, because I didn't think it was maybe necessary, but I will share it. So my big dream was to go to theater school. I went to a performing arts high school. I was a theater major. I loved being on stage. There was a lot of, and it's not even just the rejection of theater. It's like I self-rejected. Like, I was told by my family, if I went to theater school instead of getting a real education, like, I would not be supported. They would not help me out, things like that. And that kind of took me off my path. So I decided to go to like university. I went on all the university tours, and I picked the one I liked the best, because I luckily did get into all the ones I wanted to go to. But what I said is I chose politics because it's like theater, but in public. And like, that was the thing I would say over and over and over again. And even when I started working in government, like after university, same thing. It was like, you'd get asked in interviews, like, what's your dream job? And you're supposed to say like, oh, I would love to be the manager of this division. That's my dream. But I would say things like, my dream job would be a talk show host. And the reason I went to politics, into politics instead of into theater school, is because, well, it's just politics is just theater in the real world, or like, I was always something along those lines. And to me, I'm now realizing it was just this like comforting soundbite that is also a lie. Like, it was such a lie. Because now I'm not even in politics anymore either.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting and so important to acknowledge and share too, because again, I'm sitting here going, yep.
Right.
And I know people listening are too.
Mm-hmm.
So we have our limiting beliefs, right? There are our excuses and our barriers, and they're what our brain believes to be true, even though it's not. Something as simple as, I can't work out because I'm not strong enough, right?
Yeah,
we believe that to be true, even though it's not, for example. But this kind of opens up another conversation in terms of what are they're not barriers or excuses, but what's our reasoning that's holding us back too. I'm sure there's a name for it. I got to look it up, but I'm sure there's a name for what that is. But thank you for that, Shadoe. Yeah, because we do talk ourselves into things that we know deep down inside may not be right for us.
Right.
And that comes from societal pressure, family pressure, whatever it is. It's really hard to say, nope, I'm going to go against the grain, and I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
You talked about interrupting at the beginning.
Go ahead.
No, it's interesting. When I started working for government too, like, I kept, like, this was like a foundational lie. And then there was all these mini lies on top of it. Like, oh, I'm going to get into politics, and then I'm going to build up my experience, and then I'm going to run for office, and I'm going to get to be this like outgoing person I've always wanted to be. And again, it wasn't true. Like, I just kept telling myself all these things because I knew that like having a good job was so important. And right now, I mean, it's like, it's a multi-faceted regret, because in some ways I did really like my job. Like, there's some things I was lying to myself about, but there were some things I loved. And just, but because it was all based on this like foundation of lies, I guess it started eating away at me day after day. And now I'm trying to find a new path, and it technically feels better, but it doesn't like impress others. It doesn't help my bills. It doesn't help this other part of my brain that still wants to impress.
Yeah. So you're deconditioning, right? Yeah. So the first thing you said was, it doesn't impress others. Who gives a shit?
I know. I guess I care because like when I go to like, I don't want people to be concerned about me. I guess that's a big part of it, is that like if I go to a family gathering and people are like, oh, so like where do you work now? And I don't have like the perfect answer for that, it makes me feel a lot of shame. Like and then I also feel, it's not just personal shame. I can tell that they're worried, and I don't want them to worry. So like that's part of it too, is that I'm still almost taking care of their feelings before mine.
I think so many of us do that. And if you step back, I do it too. I'm guilty of it too.
Right.
You step back, you don't want them to worry, but whose choice is it to worry?
True.
Right. Whose choice is it to worry? It's their choice. It doesn't actually affect you unless you let it affect you. And
which I do.
Which you do. And I know that this is easier said than done, but to have the confidence to stand in who you are and give a shit what other people think, but it's more than that. It's not about not giving a shit what other people think, because that's sometimes comes from a place of anger. It's about becoming the most self-aware version of yourself that you can be, and knowing and feeling confident in the decisions you make for yourself, and knowing that that's going to make you a person of high vibe, which I'll get into later, because you have to live in low vibe and high vibe, everybody. It's not just like good vibes only, everybody. That's toxic positivity. But to be a person that is in a state that is peace, freedom, joy 51% of the time, it doesn't have to be 100% of the time, is confidence. And isn't that the mission in life? And that's part of the reason why we're doing this process, right? Is to let go of the things that are holding us back. And you're literally doing it right now in this minute, right?
You're being so helpful. I love
people. We're helping listeners know too, because what you have talked about today, and ironically what I'm going to talk about today as well, is I think these are really real and normal feelings. So we're talking about regrets, guilt, shame in this podcast, embarrassment, and letting those things go. One of the things that we really need to let go or normalize, or I think society needs to normalize, is that every human being has bad thoughts. It's normal to have bad thoughts. And we really punish ourselves for having those thoughts. And then we just, again, people pleasing cycle, guilt cycle, all those things. It is a normal part of the human condition to have negative thoughts, bad thoughts, guilt thoughts, shame thoughts, thoughts of anger towards other people. What is important is how you choose to take action on those thoughts.
For sure.
And that's the difference. So we need to normalize a diversity in the way we think, and accept that that's part of the human condition, and that's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
You're human. That's part of being human, right? And yeah, I'm going to go off on a big long tangent, so I'm not, but
that's okay.
We'll continue to talk. Like, that's the point of this podcast. We'll continue to talk about these things, right? So we also need to normalize allowing people to do what they need to do to find personal joy and happiness. And so we put pressure on ourselves to do what we think other people or society needs us to do. And then we also put pressure on the people that we love to do what we think is best for them to do. And we're just continuing to feed that cycle. So you've heard me say this before.
Yeah.
No is a sentence. You can just say no. You don't have to explain yourself all the time to everyone. You can just say no, period.
Right.
Do you want milk or sugar in your tea?
No.
Nothing.
Neither. I'm
neither. No. You want to be like, no, I'm not eating sugar right now because I'm like trying to lose weight. And it's like, no. Do you want sugar in your tea? No. Right. So if you're one of those people that's constantly explaining no, K-N-O-W, no, that you have some patterning or conditioning where you need to rely on other people's opinions. I think that comes from fear. And I have that patterning and conditioning too. Fear of not being loved, fear of being abandoned, fear of not being in control, fear of nobody liking you. But the reality is that there will always be people in your life that love you and like you and that don't abandon you, including your dog, Gertie.
That's true. I want to pick your brain about, you brought up this really good thing about like, we put pressure on loved ones and all this other stuff because we want them to have this other life. But what about like internalized pressure about, now that I've made this decision that like, I don't want to work in a 9-to-5 in the public service. I feel like I put a lot of pressure on myself to prove that was a good decision. Like I need to say like, oh, because my book was published or my art was chosen or I'm talking at this thing. I need to like, I feel this like immense pressure still to impress others, but with like not what they expect of me, but to now live up to this new expectation I've set for myself.
Yeah, I get that because Shadoe and I have very similar stories. I also left a government corporate position to start my own business. And I really struggled with that for a long time. And I think that's preconditioning too. And sometimes I still do. Not very often though. I'm pretty happy with what I'm doing now. But yeah, I grew up in a family where you get a 9 to 5, a safe job, and you get security and you want to have a pension. And I think that's our generation. So I think our generation, our parents' generation, my parents are boomers, our parents' generation, that was the conditioning and the thing, and they passed that conditioning on to us. And we're kind of in that cusp generation of many of us went with that and some people haven't. And then the millennials really are like, it's about happiness, right? It's about happiness and joy and loving what I do. So I guess my question to you is, whose expectations are you trying to meet?
I think they're still my expectations. I just really want to be able to like prove, like, I guess the other thing is there's like the word sacrifice keeps getting put in my head here, and it's not like sacrifice.
Oh, interesting. Why do you think that word's coming up? Why do you think that word's coming up? That's so interesting.
I think it's because I was the first person in my immediate family to go to university. Like my parents barely finished high school, and it was almost like me going to university was representative of all the sacrifices they made throughout my childhood. And to now almost throw that degree in the trash, because if I'm not working for the government, why did I even go through that education process?
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Cut me off here.
So that's disregarding experience as garbage.
Right.
Everything has made you who you are. Like, what did you get out of that experience? What skills did you get out of that experience that you're using now?
Oh,
you don't have to answer. Tons, right?
Yeah. That's a good question.
So disregarding the experience, I think this happens a lot too. I see this a lot in some younger people that I coach as well, or friends, kids, or whatever, right? This whole idea, you go to university, you choose your major in first year or college, and then you decide you don't like it anymore.
Right.
And then this is what happens. Either guilt trip comes from the parents, or people guilt themselves and say, well, I just wasted a year, so I might as well finish the degree and be miserable for 3 more years.
Right.
Why would you waste 3 more years? Like, why do we think about everything in terms of, okay, so we think about things in terms of money and material things because we live in a materialistic society, right?
Right.
So when we think of abundance, our mind goes to money and material things instead of thinking about abundance in terms of experiences, in terms of skills, in terms of feelings, emotions, connectedness, right? So that preconditioning of like, I'm just throwing it in the garbage, I'm disregarding it. That's no, because the abundance that you got from that experience gave you skills, gave you emotional intelligence, gave you self-awareness, right? You're not throwing that in the garbage. Nobody can take that away from you.
Yeah, you're right. Nobody
can take that away from you. You got an abundant experience from that, right? Here's another thing. I've been doing a lot of studying or researching, researching on studies about material things and this idea of like abundance and happiness. This is really one of my passions. And tons and tons of studies have said that experiences bring us happiness, bring us joy, bring us peace, bring us contentment in terms of positive experiences versus things. So you're looking at your university degree as a thing, right? I'm throwing it in the trash, right?
Right.
But look at it as an experience, because studies show that when we remember a positive experience, our brain actually lights up in the same way as if we were actually experiencing it. Mm-hmm. So versus when we buy something shiny and new, we get really excited about it, about a thing, and then that goes away and we never get that excitement about the thing again. So here's my pivot for you, my shift for you, my reset for you. Look at the university experience as an experience. Don't look at it as a thing.
Right.
And maybe that will help your brain shift a little bit and relieve some of the regret and guilt that you feel around it.
I hope so. I don't know if you can tell the shirt I'm wearing from your side.
Ooh, I do see it.
The shirt I'm wearing, funnily enough, Victoria couldn't see it. But this shirt is easily 15 years old because it's from my second or third year of university. And it's from, again, a tavern that I would have never visited had I not gone to that university. And I remember getting this shirt, and even though it's like, really starting to show its age,
you can give it a shout out.
They're not open anymore.
That's okay. Give them a shout out anyways.
So the Pig's Ear Tavern in Peterborough, if you've been there, it was a special place. And I still, like you're saying, like when I put on this shirt, my brain lights up like I just went there again. And I haven't been there in 10 years easily.
Oh my God. Okay. So this is crazy. This keeps happening every time we record a podcast. Serendipity, right? We didn't plan that you were going to wear that shirt. Then we've had this discussion.
No.
Right. And I get excited about the Pig's Ear. I didn't go to the university in Peterborough, but I grew up in Peterborough. So Shadoe and I have this Peterborough connection. Peterborough, Canada, everybody, not Peterborough, England, Peterborough, Canada. So I didn't even see you wearing that shirt. I mean, my subconscious might have seen you wearing that shirt, but it may have guided this conversation or not. Universe, energy, subconscious. Things come together, right?
Yeah.
How do you? And one more curious question: how do you feel? How do you feel? Did the feedback help? How do you feel?
The feedback did help. I mean, I'm sure even listeners will notice that I was clearly trying to make one point in my letter, but then as I was reading it out loud, I changed my mind. So I was trying to come up with new words on the spot. But I think this was really helpful, and I think even just like digging a little deeper to some of not just like my main soundbite, but some of these other like things that I've just been telling myself over the years and getting rerouted is nice. And speaking of getting rerouted, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say we're accomplishing our mission. The experiment is working. Okay, what are we gonna say? Go ahead.
My segue was gonna be, and speaking of rerouting, do you want to go now with your regret today? Thank you again for so much. Yeah, that was a big relief. Thank you for that.
Good segue. Okay, thanks. So all right, I'm ready to relieve some regret.
Awesome.
Kind of along similar lines. I think ironically, we might have some of the same discussion. Okay, here we go.
Okay, great.
Okay, I have something I need to let go of in order to move forward. Here it is. I guilt myself all the time about being lazy. And this started after I left my 9-to-5 corporate job and I had a massive burnout, and that's the reason that I left it and then could not return to that job because I have trauma associated with that job now, and decided to start my own business. And I guilt myself all the time about being lazy now, ever since I've changed the trajectory of my life. I guess I have all these tasks that I want to do for my business or my day, and then I procrastinate. I fill my day in with me tasks instead. So like self-care tasks, like going for my morning walk, resting, napping. Yes, I do binge watch some TV too. Now I put in the work. I'm really passionate about my business. I look at social media. I feel like, and then I look at things like hashtag boss babe stuff or hashtag, owning my own business stuff. And then I start to feel guilty, like I'm not doing enough work because all these people are posting about how important it is to hustle. And I think, wow, I should be further ahead in my business than I am. And then my inner monologue goes into, well, you're lazy. You should do more. You're a failure. You could be so much farther ahead if you hadn't been lazy. So the consequence of holding on to this idea that I'm lazy is that I'm just going to keep putting myself into a shame spiral, and that isn't good for my emotional and mental health. When I decided to stop working in the corporate world and in the government world, because I had a total mental burnout and had to take 2 years off to heal my mental health, I decided that I was going to live a life where I do go for morning walks every morning. I do have structure in my life, and I never want to experience overwhelm and burnout again. And I want to help others never experience it again as well. In order to do that fully, I need to let go of this limiting belief that I'm lazy, and I need to stop listening to outside expectations of what it means to be a female business owner and what it means to be hustling. The consequence of me holding on to this limiting belief that I'm lazy is I will lose resilience that I've built up because I'll be beating myself up. And, you know, maybe I set up those unrealistic expectations of how much I should be doing in my day and how fast my business should be evolving. But guess what? It's my business, and I can choose what the expectations are. I don't have a boss. I can choose how fast or slow that I go. So too much looking outside for advice and not enough looking inside to what I really want my life to look like and be like is what I need to let go of. So I want a life of freedom where I can go for a walk with my husband every morning by the lake. And I have that now. And that's not being lazy. That's pretty great. So I did everything I could in the moments where my mind thinks I'm being lazy when I look back. But in that moment, maybe I needed to rest. In that moment, maybe I needed to watch some mind-numbing television. So here's what I say to myself. I did everything I could in those moments with the tools I had at that time, and that's okay. That's who I was then. I'm growing every day at my own pace using small and slow solutions. And I like that. I accept that. I like who I am. I get to choose my life. I am calmer and relieved and more confident. And I am free to use my energy the way I want to use my energy to grow my business. And I will no longer judge myself. I relieve myself of the regret. I will no longer judge myself for being lazy, and I am worthy of abundance in my life.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. Do you want feedback today, or were you hoping to be heard?
I'd love feedback because I think it ties into the conversation we were having about your regret today.
I'm glad you want feedback because I have a whole page of notes here.
Awesome. Lay it on me.
So where I'm going to start is, do you get a morning walk every single day?
About, I'd say 5 days a week. It's a pretty good habit. Yeah. I don't have a dog, everybody. I have a cat. I feel like if you have a dog, it's easier to put that structure into your life. When you don't have a dog, you really have to make a conscious effort to do it.
Oh, for sure.
And my husband and I purposefully moved close to the lake. We sold our house and now we rent a place closer to the lake because we both really wanted to be on the boardwalk. And we are. And nice. So I would say 5 out of 7 days of the week, I go for a walk all year long, in the winter too.
You find that these thoughts creep up like on those 2 days you don't go for a walk, or is it just like whenever? Like when do they creep up the most?
It's so interesting. And I never thought about it, but yeah, they totally creep up on the days that I don't go for the walk.
Right. Yeah. Because I just, that really stood out to me that I just, that walk is so important. Like it really is. I don't really go for a walk until like noon, because I'm on the noon duty for Gertie and Ben takes her out in the morning. But I feel so rejuvenated when I get back. And then I'm like, oh, maybe I should do this earlier in my day. But then again, wasteful because I'm gonna have to take her out again in like 2 hours. So why would I do that? I also, you alluded to this while you were talking, so I just wanted to give you a bit more time to talk about it. I would say some of like the hashtag boss babe hustle culture kind of stuff is counterintuitive to the exact business model you're trying to promote. So I find it interesting that you still feel compelled to like pull into a type of business model that isn't really suited to your business.
Well, yeah, exactly. So that's it's interesting because so that shows the preconditioning of working in the hustling for over 25 years, right? Over 20 years. I was caseworker and a corporate wellness coordinator for over 20 years. And I've been in the wellness field for over 25 years, but I would say I was in that hustling for 20 years. Let's say for 20 years, I was in the hustling environment. And that just shows the power of preconditioning, right? Or conditioning. And it shows the power of letting go. And it shows the power of not the power. I want people to know that I'm not perfect either. Like that's the message in my business too, right? Yeah. Because when we look at these things and we look at people's social medias and we look at these things, I want people to know that yes, I'm an example and I'm a leader and I'm living my life in abundance, but also I do work every day. Like I do work on myself every day. I do work on myself every month. And these preconditioned or conditioned thoughts can still creep in. Right. So it's kind of what I was saying as well, as we only have to be in high vibe 51% of the time, not 100% of the time. And I'm a human being. And that's totally. We need to normalize that people are human beings instead of idolizing what we see on social media. You know, we might look at another like life coach. I'll look at another life coach and all they post is this amazing stuff and don't actually post real stuff about themselves. And I think, oh, well, their life must be perfect. Where am I going wrong? And this is a continual thing that we need to be aware of and work on and process, because that's the society we live in. And yes, that's the struggle that I have. Sometimes I think I should be pushing more with my business and hustling more, but then that preconditioning of you're lazy. And I'll tell you where that lazy comes in. When I had my breakdown at work and I was working 2 workload portfolios, I was actually covering 2 positions, but fitting it all into 40 hours a week. And then before I had my breakdown at work, I started to bring it up to managers and supervisors. And then I filed an official complaint and I started getting bullied. And the way that I got bullied was people would talk behind my back or to my face and tell me that I was just being lazy because I didn't want to do all the work that was expected of me. So I obviously have a preconditioning about this idea of being lazy or not meeting the standards. And that's what I am relieving today by talking about this to you and to the world. And I think I need to continue to talk about it. It's important to talk about it because we have really unrealistic expectations in the workforce right now. And we need to treat human beings like human beings.
For sure.
We need to treat people with compassion, and we need to treat ourselves with compassion and acknowledge that why would we want to spend 40 years of our life hustling when those are the 40 years that we're in prime health to work for our retirement years? The goal is to have a job that you don't need, the goal is to have a job you don't need a vacation from, but that you take your vacation from, knowing that you'll come back and not have a ton of work that's been built up. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
The goal is to have a job that you enjoy, and the goal is to be in a workplace that you are fulfilled and satisfied in, but that also allows you to take vacation and self-care without guilt. And that's not what's happening.
No.
And I was in that culture for over 20 years. It's going to be a lot of deconditioning for me. Talking about it helps me decondition.
I guess similar to what came up with my share is do you think there's almost a new expectation to prove that you're living this calmer life? Like, you want to almost put some stuff out there that's like, yeah, this is me being a calm life. I have a job I don't need to take a vacation from.
Yeah.
Is that a new set of expectations that might be unrealistic?
I think that's what happens with going from a job with a boss in security to being an entrepreneur. And I think this is a problem in the entrepreneurial world. Is part of being an entrepreneur is having a social media presence. And how do you do that authentically, truthfully, with vulnerability? How do you be yourself? And how do we start to get rid of those expectations in social media, society of, oh, the entrepreneurs are living their perfect life too, and acknowledge that we're still having a human experience with diversity of feelings, emotions, and ups and downs, no matter what your choice is of where you find work, I guess.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I also wonder if it leads to, again, this word coming up again, sacrifice, that like, because we're doing work that we enjoy more than a traditional boss employee relationship, does that mean we charge less?
Oh yeah, this is a big one. I think this is a huge one because it has to do with self-worth too, right? And I think that's where a lot of young entrepreneurs go wrong that are in the service-based industry, is charging less. Charging less, because then that sends a signal to your brain about your worth. And I made that mistake. Maybe I will talk about it on another one. That'll definitely be a regret that I talk about it on another episode when I started and not charging enough. But this idea that when you grow up in a society or a family, and we both did in families that were like, get the 9-to-5 job with the pension, with the benefits, get the security, we're automatically programmed that that's the best it's going to be, that's like the gold standard. That's where we want to be. And then, so because of that, we think, okay, as entrepreneurs, as owning my own business, I'm sacrificing because I'm never going to make as much money as in the gold standard, because I'm leaving that job of security, benefits, 9-to-5. And so you have to be super aware that you set your mindset to a place of abundance instead of a place of, well, I'm never going to make as much money on my own as I did in that safe, secure 9-to-5 job that had a cap on your salary that you could never make more of. But we were trained in the families that we grew up in that cap was amazing, that was like the gold standard, that's what you want, is that 9-to-5 secure job. But the reality is that I have the potential to have a way more abundant life with my business. I have the potential to make more money than I did in the 9-to-5 corporate / government world that I worked in. But I have to allow my mind to believe that. So we have to switch the word sacrifice to possibility.
Right. That's a great answer. My last piece of feedback then is, are you interested in a reframe that my ADHD coach gave me about this exact thought?
Absolutely. Give it to me.
Excellent. So when you're feeling guilt about being lazy, just stop and ask yourself, were you being lazy or was it self-preservation? Because if you're rested, you can make other decisions easier. So if you took that nap, but then all evening you cranked out a bunch of content, or all evening, it doesn't even have to be measured that way, but like, then the evening came and you were able to calmly do your chores of the evening, or you took a nice shower, and then like the next day was so much better because you weren't super stressed out and at your max. I feel like a lot of time in my 9-to-5, I was constantly running on this like level that was not sustainable. And now I find when I do take those steps back, I feel a lot of guilt around it. And then I don't recognize how much stronger my productive hours are because I am being productive in a rested state and not in an like emergency state, if that makes sense. What do you think about that?
Amazing. Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate your ADHD coach. That's exactly what I was going for with this releasing statement, or is I need to acknowledge it's not being lazy. I need to pivot it into that it's self-care.
Yeah. And not just self-care, but like self-preservation is so different than self-care. I feel like self-care is being a little bit.
Yeah, do it. Rant on it. It's being overused. Go for it.
Okay.
Let's hear a rant. Let's hear a rant.
And it's always like, oh, it's a bubble bath. Oh, it's a massage. And it's like, no, sometimes it's just, saying F it and taking a day.
Yes, thank you for that, because I think self-care is being overused as well. Self-care, resilience are both being overused. So yes.
Cool.
Thank you for your feedback. I appreciate it. And I do actually feel like I've pivoted. Nice. The experiment's working, everybody. I do feel like I've pivoted. All right. Are you ready to close off?
I am.
All right. Let's take our 3 releasing breaths. On the first, put your one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly. If you're listening, as long as you're not driving, as long as you're in a safe place, one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly.
Feet on the floor. My feet weren't. I'm such a bad tucker now that we're doing this.
Feet on the floor. You're right. Put your feet on the floor and feel the earth below you, and know that gravity and the planet are always supporting you. They are always your foundation. Take a big breath in. I release pressure and expectations. Another breath in. I relieve my regrets. My past does not define me. I am excited to move forward. What an awesome session, Shadoe. Thank you.
Yeah, this was great.
I love you.
Thank you. I love you. All right. Thanks. And we love everyone out there listening to us today.
Thanks, everybody. We hope that this made a difference in your lives, because it certainly made a difference in my life today. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and we'll see you next time. As always, I'm Victoria Muir-Garcia.
I'm Shadoe Ball.
And let's relieve regret. Bye, everybody.
This episode of Let's Relieve Regret was produced by Shadoe Ball and Victoria Muir-Garcia.
Editing by me, Victoria Muir-Garcia.
We are an independent podcast supported by you, our listeners.
If you think this podcast sends a valuable message, you had an aha moment, or learned something new about yourself, help us realize our goal of reaching as many listeners as possible.
We encourage you to take action and support us right now by choosing one of the following options.
You can easily support us by
following us on Instagram at relieve.regret.
Tell 2 friends.
Leave a 5-star review on whatever app you're listening to us on.
Leave a tip at coffee.com/Let's Relieve Regret podcast. That's ko-fi.com/Let's Relieve Regret podcast.
Join our conversations in the Facebook group, Let's Relieve Regret Podcast.
Find all this information, all the links, and more in the podcast notes. Okay, bye.
Bye.